Optimal health for high performers. This is the Health Upgrade Podcast with Dr. Nawaz Habib.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Health Upgrade Podcast. This is Dr. Habib. I am excited to share this episode. This was a presentation that I gave very recently on a topic known as Pyrrole disorder. This is a condition that a lot of medical doctors, a lot of practitioners haven't even heard of. It's a very unique condition in that it's only available to be diagnosed through certain tests, and it has a very strong connection to immune dysregulation and vagus nerve dysfunction. And so today's episode is titled The Pyrrole Disorder-Vagus Nerve Connection. And so this presentation that I gave, I'm just kind of condensing what we have in here, about 20 minutes worth of great content, 25 minutes, somewhere in there. And the idea is to help you understand what pyrrole disorder is and how it affects your vagus nerve. We've often been asked, what is that connection? How does stress create this effect on the vagus nerve through a biochemical means? Well, this episode and this topic explains one of those pathways for many, many people, particularly those dealing with mental health style or emotional dysregulation type issues. So I really hope you appreciate and enjoy and learn something in this episode, and we'll catch you all at the end of it. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And I want to dig into today's prime topic, which is that hidden biochemical culprit known as pyrrole disorder. So pyrrole disorder is a biochemical condition that is known to trigger emotional dysregulation, nutrient depletion, and vagus nerve dysfunction. So let's start off this story by exploring right off the bat, what are pyrroles? Now, pyrroles are biochemical rings that, when bound to iron, make up a very important molecule known as heme. So we've got these rings here. They're kind of the nitrogen plus 5 carbons or 4 carbons on them. And this is what's known as a pyrrole. When we take 4 pyrrole rings and we tie them together with methane bridges, okay, that's these bridges over here, we get this molecule. And then we add an iron into this molecule that's bound to each of these nitrogens, and we get a molecule known as heme. Okay, so 4 pyrroles together plus iron creates a heme molecule. Now, what is heme? Sounds familiar, but let's talk about what it is. Heme is actually the base molecule that binds oxygen in the red blood cells. 4 heme groups bound together make up a molecule known as hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the molecule that resides in the red blood cells, and their function is to transport oxygen around the body. So the way this works is we've got these 4 pyrroles attached to an iron, and this circle is known as heme. And then we've got different types of heme. We've got 2 alpha chains and 2 beta chains that come together to form hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is located within these red blood cells. And when oxygen comes in from the lungs, oxygen binds to the iron in the hemoglobin. And then the oxygen binds with that hemoglobin molecule and goes through the bloodstream. And then that oxygen is released to the tissue cells as the red blood cell rolls through the blood vessel. So pyrroles make up this initial piece to the heme molecule and bind oxygen. So it's really important that we have well-functioning heme and well-functioning pyrrole levels. So when everything is working, hemoglobin levels in the red blood cells remain good. Oxygen gets around the body effectively. Heme holds iron and pyrroles in the red blood cells. Low pyrrole levels in the urine are noted, and generally, nutrient levels remain optimal. But what about when it isn't working? When the system breaks down, this is where we might start to notice that hemoglobin levels in your complete blood count in your blood work, that these levels are changing, and there's a lot of fluctuation within hemoglobin levels. Oxygen doesn't get around the body as effectively, meaning that we're not able to get this oxygen that's required for cellular respiration to get to where it needs to go, and heme ends up breaking down. What that means is that iron levels on blood work may be suboptimal, and it shows up very clearly as high pyrrole levels in the urine. Now, why this matters is pyrroles, these are those 4 molecules that are attached within a heme group. These pyrroles strongly bind to important nutrients and leach them from the body, specifically vitamin B6 and zinc. Why does this matter? Why does it matter if we are binding and removing vitamin B6 and zinc from the body? Well, amongst many others, the functions of vitamin B6 are pretty intense. They're quite vast. They help our bodies convert nutrients into food. We're talking specifically on vitamin B6 right now, helping our bodies convert nutrients into energy, help form our red blood cells, which is really important, obviously, if we need to get our blood's oxygen and everything around. It helps to actually form our genetic material so it holds these things tight. It is very, very important for brain development and brain functionality, not only during pregnancy and infancy, but it helps to keep our brain healthy and functioning well as we age, and balances the levels of homocysteine in the blood. And this is really important when it comes to cardiovascular function. So low levels of vitamin B6 are going to deplete each of these functions. Now, what about zinc? Well, zinc is linked to virtually every system in the body. It helps with maintaining homeostasis. It helps with synthesis of DNA and RNA. It is very heavily involved in the immune system. It is involved in apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. If we remove zinc, the chances of cancerous growths increases pretty significantly because we don't have this programmed cell death taking place effectively. The nervous system is heavily reliant on zinc, particularly for our neurotransmitter levels. The endocrine system as well, this is our hormones, are heavily reliant on zinc. Proteins and enzymes play a huge role, and zinc is very, very involved there. And signal transduction as well, essentially allowing for signals to get through to the body and between different cells and communication. Zinc is heavily, heavily involved with. You can imagine if we're removing vitamin B6 and zinc from the body at high levels, we're going to have a breakdown in functionality. And that breakdown in functionality shows up in what's called Pyrrole disorder. And what we tend to see in somebody that has very high levels of pyrroles in their urine is poor stress control, sensitivity to lights, odors, sounds, textures, high irritability, short temper, severe inner tension, extreme mood swings, white spots on their fingernails. This is particularly linked to the zinc dysfunction or zinc depletion, depression, poor growth, anxiety, frequent infections, poor memory, and a big one here, carb cravings despite eating a healthy diet. This could be the missing link for a lot of people that are dealing with emotional dysregulation. Zinc and vitamin B6 are absolutely essential for vagus nerve function. Zinc deficiency impairs our ability to signal the parasympathetic nervous system, which we know runs through the vagus nerve, and vitamin B6 depletion reduces neurotransmitter production as well. And we know that serotonin helps balance mood, dopamine helps balance drive, and GABA helps balance calm. And these are going to be reduced when B6 levels are depleted. The result of all this, the vagus nerve is suppressed in its functionality. We are unable to send these important anti-inflammatory parasympathetic signals effectively, and your body then, from a biochemical standpoint, gets stuck in a sympathetic overdrive state. This is that fight or flight state, and it essentially becomes stuck in that state. That is incredibly powerful because now we're looking at a biochemical cause for emotional and psychological dysregulation. We have a very clear line, a very clear link between these two. And this is one of those very, very common links. So, what would cause pyrrole disorder in the first place? I'd love for you in the chat to just share, where do you think this is coming from in the first place? What do you think is causing pyrrole disorder? The answer absolutely is stress. Stress is the single cause of pyrrole disorder. Oxidative stress, particularly oxidative forms, but it comes from emotional, psychological, physical, and biochemical stress. Stress in its oxidative form breaks down heme and hemoglobin, releasing these pyrroles. And it becomes a vicious cycle because we know that the role of the vagus nerve is to reduce stress. But if stress causes vagus nerve dysfunction, where do you think that goes? This is that vicious cycle. Stress causes pyrrole release depletes vitamin B6 and zinc and other nutrients, and That leads to vagus nerve dysfunction, which leads to greater stress, which leads to a cycle of breakdown, a cycle of everything breaking down. Stress is the key. And we'll talk about the types of stress and how we would approach eliminating this particular issue on an individual basis. So I want you to take a moment and I want you to imagine a life where you wake up every day with energy and emotional clarity, one where you feel resilient and grounded even when life gets challenging, one where you understand the biological reasons of your health challenges and know the exact protocols to overcome it. And I want you to experience emotional freedom and lasting peace of mind. And what's exciting is that this transformation isn't just possible, it's actually within your reach with the right guidance. I've had numerous patients run through different iterations of this program, and they've all had really great results when they can dedicate the time and effort to making these changes happen. I was lucky enough to work with these three people that I'm going to highlight for you. Joelle went from a very scary diagnosis to healed and empowered, feeling like a better mom. Kate turned her health trajectory from breaking down to optimal gut health and happiness. And Lucas was feeling more resilient, able to handle the curveballs that life throws at him. These are just three examples. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients in our company at Health Upgraded. And the solution that we created, the solution that we've decided on, and one that we're going to be helping you to work through if this is something you choose to work with us on, is the Vagus protocol. I'm going to do a quick overview of how we will utilize the Vagus protocol in a case of pyrrole dysfunction or pyrrole disorder. So first off, we begin with validate. V stands for validate. A stands for activate. G stands for gut-brain immune optimization. U stands for unburden. And S stands for sustain. I'm going to go through each of these briefly, and I'm going to help to kind of uncover how pyrrole disorder can be treated and supported using the Vagus protocol. So we'll first begin with validate. Validate for me is all about getting objective data and knowing where we stand now, and then the progress that you make as we go through. Here's what's really great. You can't fix what you don't measure. You don't know where you are if you don't measure it. So measurement is key to becoming that initial stage of knowing where you are and knowing how to get where you want to go. Validation means understanding your personal baseline. And what's really exciting is that we have an opportunity to test these pyrroles through urine. So urinary pyrrole testing could very well be the root cause for each individual. We're also going to look at blood work and nutrient testing and identify what else is happening inside the body. We utilize the Vagus score assessment, which helps us to identify which areas you can change. And then we'll look into emotional resilience markers, things like stress response and sleep quality. And if you have a wearable device, we'll be able to dig into these significantly more so. Okay. When it comes to validation of urinary pyrroles specifically, though, this is done by a simple at-home test to measure those pyrrole levels through urine. The results help us to see exactly how elevated our pyrrole levels are. So in an optimal zone, we want to see them nice and low, and then it does lean upwards towards the 10 to 15 micrograms per deciliter, and then very high is anything above that 15 micrograms per deciliter. What's great is we can actually get quantitative results that help to guide your personal protocol. And that's why validation matters. Next, we get into activate. And activation is the key piece to getting vagus nerve turned back on. We're going to look into the use of vagus nerve activating therapies. We're going to utilize tools like nasal, diaphragmatic, longer exhale breathing practices, resonance breathing, CO2 tolerance, vagal toning exercises, and then interoceptive and mindfulness training. If you don't know what interoception is the ability to understand what's happening within your body, the ability to look inwards and experience the connection of brain and body really effectively and have awareness of what's happening inside. One of the main issues when it comes to mental health challenges that so many people are dealing with is they lack interoception. They lack the ability to experience what's happening within their body. There's a disconnection that has occurred. So this is a big piece to the puzzle on helping to rebuild that ability to understand what's happening within the body and build emotional resilience. As those of you who have been here before or have heard me speak before, you know that we want to activate healing mode. And the vagus nerve is the regulation tool for nervous system and builds your resilience to stress. When you don't have an activated vagus nerve, you're not going to be able to build resilience to stress. And that's really what we want to help you activate when we're working on activating the vagus nerve. Next, we're looking at gut brain immune optimization. What's happening here is specifically targeted nutrition and lifestyle support. This is where we can identify who and what type of zinc and vitamin B6 needs to be replenished for. We want to make sure that we're targeting it in the right people. And it's not just a matter of taking these supplements, but rather identifying that these are the issues that you are dealing with and ensuring that you're getting the right form of these specific nutrients that need to be replenished in these situations. We'd also love to support with targeted micronutrients for neurotransmitter synthesis to help support the serotonin levels and the dopamine levels and the GABA levels within the body. We focus on creating gut healing protocols that are targeted for each individual that help to support optimal nutrient absorption through the gut. That's really the key. We want to be able to get your nutrients into you through your foods and through targeted supplementation. We don't love putting people on 15, 20 supplements. We don't want you to be. Supplements are supplemental. We want the food to provide the nutrition that you are in need of. And so helping to create that targeted gut healing protocol that allows you to extract those nutrients from the food, that's really key. And then a recalibration of the immune system to help with recreating a positive, healthy baseline through vagus nerve activation practices. And that includes things like exercise and breath work and recovery practices and utilizing tools that can help to gain a lot of benefit during this trajectory or during this protocol. U stands for unburden, and unburden is looking at all of the sources of stress. And this is where I want to dig into all of the types of stress that can cause dysfunction in the body and result in pyrrole disorder. So we'll start with there's four different types, and we'll start with daily stressors. Daily stressors are the ones that we tend to deal with on a day-to-day basis, things like relationship challenges, parenting, financial challenges, work or business stress, poor habits. Somebody cut you off on the highway, or the kids were not getting out of the house quickly enough and you were getting stressed out. These are daily stressors. Then we get into biochemical sources of stress. And we really would like to identify as many of these as possible. Things like microbiome dysbiosis, what's happening with the bacteria, parasites, viruses, yeast, and worms in your gut. What's happening with pesticides and herbicides that might be affecting your food quality and affecting your gut microbiome and your body internally, your toxic load. Toxic air quality, where do you live? What's happening in your home? Things like that that need to be looked at. Low nutrient density foods, we want to try to eliminate those where possible. And dehydration is a huge biochemical stressor that a lot of people overlook. And I'm a big fan of keeping my water bottle with me, particularly with electrolytes and ensuring that I'm getting the right nutrients in so that I'm not dehydrated all the time. Then we get into physical stress. Physical stress is where we look at lack of movement, poor muscle quality, traumatic injuries, poor breathing mechanics, and overuse of repetitive strain injuries. These are, for the most part, sadly, overlooked when it comes to sources of stress. And this is something that, as a chiropractor myself and a person who helps to support the health of my clients through recreating and beginning more movement based practices and eliminating these traumatic injuries that many people have suffered from, we really want to identify and make sure that our bodies are moving effectively. Moving is incredibly underrated when it comes to supporting particularly mental and emotional health. Now, the last is psychological stress. And each of these types of stressors, psychological stressors, will often affect us more than we realize, even at a biochemical level. Whether you were the victim of a crime, experienced childhood trauma, you went through bouts of anxiety or depression at different times in your life, unexpected loss of loved ones, negative self-talk, these all affect the not only the vagus nerve directly, but they can trigger that breakdown of the heme molecules and result in increased pyrrole release. And that will in turn, from a biochemical standpoint, reduce B6 and zinc and thus result in vagus nerve dysfunction. So when it comes to unburdening, what we're trying to work on is helping to support an emotional and nervous system reset. This is where we release accumulated stress and trauma from your body and your mind, and we help you to go through different practices, including things like somatic release and nervous system reset practices, emotional processing and resilience building, stress burden reduction techniques. And this one's a big one because it's not just that the fact that you experienced a stressor, but it's your perception of that stressor and how it affected your health overall, how it affected you. Is it continuing to affect you? What is your perception of what happened along the way? Lastly, we get into mindfulness and nervous system awareness practices. And we're lucky to have a wonderful health coach, Valerie, on our team who helps us to identify and work through these mindfulness practices. Ultimately, when it comes to the unburden practice, we all feel like this bucket is getting full when we are under a lot of stress. And what we want to do is, on the unburden side of things, we want to work to decrease the inflow of sources of stress that are filling the bucket by identifying and addressing all four sources of stress that we talked about. And what the unburden piece in terms of the practices is going to do is help to increase the outflow of the healthy stress reduction tools that you have through foundational and science supported tools. And that's the bottom of the bucket here. That's helping to pop more holes at the bottom of the bucket so that you can release these stressors that are popping in and filling this bucket more quickly than you may currently be feeling capable of handling. Okay. Now, after unburden comes sustain, because we got to work on that vagus protocol. And sustainability is really the hallmark of the practices that we create. For those who know, we are huge fans of habit change and habit supporting books. And we are big readers here at Health Upgraded. So, helping to support you or individuals that are looking to create these positive changes in their health. Sustainability is something that we don't overlook. We want changes to last the rest of your life. And the way we do so is using mindful habit change. We don't want to go through mindlessness, where mindlessness is where habits reside. And where these existing habits reside, we don't pay attention to what's actually happening and what we can accomplish. This is different parts of the brain actually are involved in mindless and mindful functions. Mindless functions are in the medial prefrontal cortex of the brain with memory. This is where we go into overthinking, mind wandering, rumination, daydreaming. Sometimes it's good to go into those things, but the attention when you're in these processes is focused on previous experiences and the interpretation of those experiences, and our attention is on past or future. We're looking back at what happened or what could happen coming up. And these reactions are automatic. They're thought to be without conscious thought, without attention to what's happening. These are reactions, not responses. And this is where when we get into the mindless state, we elicit even more stress and anxiety. And so we're compounding biochemical stress and physical stress and emotional stress and psychological stress. And then when we get into these habits, we knock ourselves down because we are having difficulty changing these habits because we're doing so mindlessly. And so, if we can help to support optimal mindful change, this is where we help to create new habits or work to stop unwanted habits. This is located in the insula and the anterior cortex, where we have actual control over our attention. This is where we are focusing on real time processing, things that are happening right now. And that's linked very well to the present moment. That's where our attention is. The creation of perception of sensory information and identifying how you are perceiving it. What is actually objectively happening? And what is the story you're telling yourself about what's happening? Using your attention to help create a positive response rather than a reaction because you have intent and purpose behind the reaction or behind the response that you're creating. And this, when done correctly and done habitually, elicits very positive emotions. We help to create positive changes in our health through this mindful habit change process. Now, what we're going to be focused on is ongoing vagal health monitoring and maintenance, lifestyle optimization, sleep, movement, nutrition, community support and accountability, and continued growth and evolution with mindfulness as the basis by which you're creating all of these gains and supporting emotional resilience through your life. So thank you all again for joining, and we'll see you all again soon. I hope this episode provided a lot of great information for you, that you learned something new. We are launching the Emotional Resilience Upgrade Program, and we're honored to have this episode out here to show you what we can truly do through this group program. The episode is linked to this program that we're launching on April 8th of this year, and would love to have you be a part of it if this topic resonates with you. So I'll ask if you're interested, if this is something that you are interested in having done and be a part of this small group, that you reach out to us at Health Upgraded. You can go on and book a discovery call with me, or very easily, just click the link in the show notes. We will have a direct link to sign up for this particular Emotional Resilience Upgrade Program. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you all on the next one.